Hello, I'm Cole Pixley, and this video project is for a computer security course. And this project involves something we often take for granted.
Wi-Fi? Or Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi. We need it. We can't live without it. Relatives and friends come over, and often the first question they ask when they arrive is,
What's the Wi-Fi password?
how do you deal with these guests? Why is dealing with these guests important? And why is this an important but often forgotten topic? Stay connected with me and I'll guide you through how to do it. I'll also show you how to set up your Wi-Fi for better security in a small office or home network. And we'll also look at wireless decisions regarding smart home devices. I am going to demo this using Ubiquiti's Unify system. They've become a very popular brand, and I have my own home network using some of their products. At the end of the video, I'll show you a quick way to set up something similar on a consumer router. For the best wireless network setup, you'll want a couple different wireless networks, perhaps 2 or 3. In a business environment, you may want 3 or even 4 wireless networks, depending on your needs. One network will be for just the internal devices that don't leave the network. You may want a second wireless network for bring your own devices. Such as work laptops, that their primary purpose is for work and will be used at work, but may also be brought home. A third network you'll want is a guest network. This can be for employees' phones that don't need access to intranet work resources, but definitely you'll want it for customers or other guests that could be on premises. This is especially important in a home environment. I'm using a demo account that Ubiquiti provides. I'm using one so we can start from scratch in some areas and mess things up and not ruin my own home network. The settings in some places just will not save, so I'll point that out when it doesn't save, and I'll show you some of the results on my own home network, but this will just be so you can see the configuration in progress. So this demo account is using a small network. It has a gateway, a switch, and then 4 access points. It also has a whole bunch of clients that are connected to it, and they're kind of weird. So what you're going to do to start is you head to the settings. This is where you're going to configure all of your network features for the most part. Let's first go to the networks category, or heading. There's 2 networks here already, but first let's take a stop at the WAN network. This will always exist. This is your port on your gateway that connects to your modem or directly to the internet. The first thing that I would recommend changing is your DNS server. This could be Google, which it is right now. It could be your internet service provider's DNS server, but you can use any one that you want. I recommend using 1.1.1.1. And 1.1.1 is a private DNS. They are quite fast, and one of the best parts about them is that they don't sell your data. And this is just mainly a personal preference thing. So you just hit save after you set that up, and it'll show you what WAN network has saved. It hasn't actually, but we've already seen it in action. Next, we're going to create a guest LAN. We already have our main local area network, but now we need a guest one. We'll call this guest LAN. And the purpose is going to be for a guest network. By selecting this guest box, or this radio button, it will enable a couple protection features that will segregate the guests from other devices on the network. We are going to make this VLAN 100. The number doesn't matter, but I'm going to make it 100 because I'm going to make the third octet in a Class C network 100 just for organizational purposes. So that'll give us 253 IP addresses to deal with. If you need more than that, you may want to do a Class B network, and the IP will be a little bit different than that. and then we are all good for the network configuration. Okay, so it has been saved, but this demo count, so it didn't actually show up here. Next, we will move to the wireless network. Actually, we're going to go with services first. In some cases, you may want to enable universal plug and play. This is for automatic port forwarding for certain applications. Typically, this is used on home networks for games and other things, and they'll perform a little bit better if they have universal plug and play enabled. By default, it is turned off in the Unify system. To turn it on, you just hit on, and you can select which networks you want it to be enabled for. Right now, it's turned off for our LAN, and if this was not a demo account, we would see guest LAN that we just created show up here. For a guest account or a guest wireless network, you do not want universal plug and play enabled for a couple of different security risks associated with it, with the automatic port forwarding. And it's up to you if you want it enabled for your main LAN. So let's go to wireless networks. We are going to set up 2 wireless networks. One is going to be for our internal network, and it's going to be the devices that we believe are all secure connected to it. And we will call it Office Main. And make sure you select WPA Personal. And if you're in a large organization, you may want to choose WPA Enterprise, but you're going to need to use a Radius server or some other authentication server if you choose that option. Okay, for the security key, I'm going to make it very secure and call it Office Main. It's not that secure. If you want to take a look, you can always just hit the little eyeball icon and that will show it to you. And then under advanced options, now this is the power of the Unify system or any enterprise system. You get access to all of these features that you don't normally get access to on a consumer router. And that's the fun part. So all of this stuff is going to be pretty good. Make sure we're using WPA2 with AES encryption. And then if you want to mess with Gtk Rekeying, you can do that. 1 hour is fine for most cases, but this just changes the Gtk key every hour. That is for the handshake between the wireless access point and a wireless device. So the more often you change it, the more that key changes, which helps reduce any sort of hacking. And then you can also enable this Multicast Enhancement, Igmp version 3. What this does is, it's kind of complicated, but it limits the multicast traffic that is sent to clients that aren't participating in a particular multicast group. Now basically what that means is if you have multiple access points or switches, you're going to limit the amount of multicast broadcasts that are sent across a network. And by limiting those broadcasts or multicasts, you're going to reduce the overhead involved in these broadcasts, which means that there is more bandwidth on the network for devices to actually send and receive data. So basically it's a performance improvement, but unless you have lots of devices, it's possible you may not notice it. Okay, so this is good for our main network. So let's save that. And hey, it did actually show up here. So now let's create our guest network. Office guest and WPA personal. Now with a guest network, you can have it open if you want to. This will allow, it's segregated from the rest of your network, so that would be okay. But from a personal preference perspective, and from a lot of different perspectives, if it's open, it's not going to be encrypted. So guests' data will not be encrypted. And you probably want their data to be encrypted. So let's just make the password office guest. And because it's a guest network, it doesn't necessarily need to be super complicated because it's already segregated from all your other stuff if you've done everything properly. And then we'll hit this checkbox, apply guest policies. And this will automatically select this box here, which blocks any LAN to wireless LAN, multicast and broadcast data. This means that if you try to do any broadcasts on a wired network, those broadcasts aren't going to be sent onto the guest wireless network because they simply don't have to be. And now this is where we select the VLAN we created earlier. This is going to be VLAN 100. And this will make it select the guest network that we created over here. This is all good. And then enable the multicast enhancement. And then you may want to enable a wireless LAN schedule. And you can do this on any network you want. But this, during the blue area, the wireless radio will be turned on. During the gray area, it will be turned off. So say you're only going to have guests on premises between 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 during the day. If there are going to be no guests using your network outside of those times, you might want to turn off your wireless radios. That will decrease the likelihood that someone could come along and try to brute force their way into your network during the middle of the night or when you're not doing any office hours. You can also do this on an internal network if you want, just simply for the same reason, but some of those devices may be more important and need to be used during that time period. Okay, so we will turn all this on and hit OK. I will show you one other thing here regarding guest. You can create, under guest control, you can on Unify enable a guest portal. And we've all seen those portals where you connect to the network and then you have to actually open up a web browser, or maybe it'll pop up automatically and you'll have to type in a password there or agree to terms and conditions or put in a voucher. You can do all of that within the Unify system. And it's quite powerful. And it also gives you access for pre-authorization and post-authorization restrictions. So say you wanted to have, when they first connect, they're denied anywhere on the network except for the controller or the place where this is, the portal is kept. And then after they are authorized, then they will not have access to any of these particular networks. Under profiles, user groups, you can create various user groups that can be applied to wireless networks as a whole or on a per client device basis. So the default is unlimited bandwidth in both directions, but if you wanted to, you could make a guest bandwidth limiter to say maybe you wanted them to only have 50 megabits per second down, and you only want them to have maybe 10 megabits per second up. You could do that, and then under wireless networks you can apply that, or per device you can apply that. And you can also use this for some smart home stuff we'll talk about later. So talking about smart home devices, we've seen a whole ton of Internet of Things devices show up over the last couple of years. And there's going to be more and more as time goes on. And some experts, according to Kaspersky.com, says smart devices, many experts say that it's not that there's a possibility that they'll be hacked. They'll be hacked for sure. So we have to be careful about these devices that we put into our home. So I just pulled up the Nessus web client here, which is a vulnerability testing program. And I ran a vulnerability analysis on all of my smart home devices. So we can see here, these are all of the smart home devices I have in my house. We can see here that there are some pretty significant amount of information and some vulnerabilities for each of these devices. First of all, this one right here is Google Chromecast, and these two are Google Home Minis. And then some of these are Alexa devices. One of them is a Philips Hue, and there are some other ones there. But I noticed that the Google Chromecast had quite a few of these medium vulnerabilities. So if you look at them, the issues mainly has to do with certificate issues. And I saw this one here, certificate validity duration. 7,300 days is how long the SSL certificate. That seems like a really long time considering that they recommend 825 days as a maximum, and certificates issued on or before July 2016 may not be valid longer than 60 months. So that's pretty concerning. So when it comes to smart home devices, you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. First one, does this need network access? Okay. Second one is, does this need internet access? The answers to both of these questions could be different. In some cases, it may only need network access. In some cases, it may need network and internet, and in some cases, it may only need internet access. So we're going to go around my house and take a look at a couple of the devices that I have and decide whether they should, if they need network access, internet access, or what I'm going to do with them. So let's stop in the living room first. So a couple of examples of devices that you might find in your home is we have a Google Home, we have a Chromecast, a smart TV, and we also have a smart Blu-ray player. Now, let's start with the Google devices. The Google Home and the Chromecast both need network and they need internet access. I'm streaming music and video to them via my phone or computers, and that's where the network access comes into play. Internet for streaming from web services like Spotify or Google Play Music or YouTube, any of those sort of things that come from the internet. So they do need to be on the main network. I did try separating them and making it so you could send traffic to them, but they could not send traffic to the main network, and that wasn't working out very well. So I was not able to get that to work. The TV is another example of a network and internet device. The network comes from me having to send and cast video to it from a computer or a file server I have or my phone, and that's where the network comes to play. Internet for Netflix and any sort of web streaming services. For you, maybe you don't have any network streaming things that you care about. You could just have it an internet device and put it on the guest network or an Internet of Things network. And that way it only gets internet access and it's segregated from the rest of your network because these devices could be hacked, as we saw in the vulnerability on my computer. Now, the Blu-ray player, I already have these streaming devices, so I don't need the Blu-ray player to do any sort of smart things whatsoever besides play Blu-rays and DVDs. So it is not connected to my network or the internet. And if you're in a business environment and you have TVs, chances are it's going to be a smart TV. But this is a famous example of something we have in the IT world, saying called, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So in these cases, I don't have this connected to the internet or our network, and in a business environment, you might not want to connect all your TVs to the network at all. All right, here we have a smart plug. Now, this Wi-Fi smart plug connects to the wireless network to allow you to control any device that's plugged into the outlet. Now, the smart plug does not need access to the network. When you are connected, you press the on and off button on your phone or via a smart hub like Amazon Alexa, and the smart device will get the signal from the internet. So it doesn't actually travel across the network at all. So this would be a perfect example of a device that needs internet but does not need the network. So another thing we haven't talked about yet is Philips Hue bulbs or other smart bulbs. Now, Philips Hue has a hub that connects to your router, and the device actually does not need internet access to work. It can use internet, so you can control your lights remotely, but it doesn't actually need internet. So you could put a firewall policy in place on your network to make Hue just use the internal network, so that when you're at home, any of like the switches here, these will work. Or if you use your phone, your phone can control them, but that will keep any internet intrusions from getting to your Philips Hue hub if you so choose. Okay, so after configuring the Office guest network that I just showed you how to do, I went ahead and connected my phone and a laptop to an equivalent network called Office Guest. You can see that it's found this device here, and it's got a IP address of 192.168.100.160. So that 100 is what we set up earlier for being on this network. And I also have my laptop connected to it. So if I scan, if we did it properly, we won't see the laptop. And I don't see it. So this has an address of 160. So let's go over here to the Mac, and we see that this has an IP address of 100.25. So we can see they're on the same network. So let's ping the other device and see if we get a response, which we don't. So by configuring the network in the way we have, we cannot see any of the other devices on that network. Now, let me show you a different example where if I connect to my internal network, which does have device discovery enabled, and I scan, you'll notice I have a whole bunch of different devices on here. The Wi-Fi setup I just showed you works pretty well if you have enterprise hardware or access to the Unify system. But what if you don't? What if you're just a home user trying to protect your network a little bit better? Well, luckily, most consumer routers have some form of guest access or protection built in. I'm going to show you using this Linksys router here. It's a couple years old, but it has a guest control feature, and I'll show you how to set it up on this one. So every single router looks different, but this one highlights guest access right here. It's pretty easy to find on this particular router. Now, all you have to do to turn it on is click on this, turn it on, type in a network name and then a password, and then you hit OK. And that's all you have to do to set up a guest network on this Linksys router. Now, while this is easy to configure, the downside to one of these consumer routers is lack of customizability. You never know exactly what you're going to get because each vendor has completely different features and different interfaces. Now, this one's pretty good because it tells me right here that guest access allows visitors to connect to your wireless guest network and access the internet without giving access to other computers or personal data. That's exactly what we want in this case. Now, where this won't work is if you want to have some shared resources on a guest network. Now, I'm not going to go into that at all right now in this video. But say you wanted to share a printer with your guests, but you didn't want anybody else to access it. You couldn't do that with a system like this. The other thing that you notice here is that this is 2.4 gigahertz. Now, this is a dual band router, but you can only have a guest network on the 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so I just showed you how to set up a Wi-Fi network on both your own internal network and having a guest network on both consumer hardware and enterprise hardware. Now, when guests connect to your network, any malware or problems that they bring with them isn't going to infect your own network, which is exactly what we want. Plus, if you have a file server or any other network resources that you don't want guests to use, guests can't have them. That's why they're segregated on that side, and you have your own stuff on the other side. Plus, by having a guest network, you are able to tell them, oh yeah, connect to, it's this Wi-Fi SSID, and here's the password. You're able to freely give that password away without having to go and type the password in yourself if you only want to give access to certain people. Having Wi-Fi is an expected convenience, almost a utility for people to have now. So by having a guest network, you're bettering your own business by keeping out these risks, but you're also having a better customer experience by allowing them to have easy Wi-Fi to connect to. To make Wi-Fi easier, you can actually put your Wi-Fi credentials into a QR code. I've done this and I put it on my refrigerator, so any guests that come over can just scan the QR code with their phone. I know it works in iOS 11 and it works in Android. You can just scan the QR code with your phone and it'll automatically connect you or prompt you to connect to that wireless network. And then it's also good to just have the SSID and the password maybe right next to the QR code. So just in case the QR code doesn't work or they have a device that doesn't allow that to work, you can use the basic password and SSID instead. But that makes it really convenient for guests to come over and connect to your wireless network. That wraps up the video project. I hope you learned something.